Hi, this is Julie with Beadaholique, and in this video we're going to cover a lot of ground because I'm going to teach you all about EnviroTex jewelry clay. Now this is an epoxy two-part clay, and it's something I've never done a video on before, so I really want to show you the clay itself, how to use it and mix it, how to color it, which is pretty cool because you can color this if you want to, how to add mica powder to it, and how to put it in a bezel and stamp it. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. So let's begin. So here is the actual product itself. And I want to keep it in the packaging just so that you can see some of the examples they have here. Since I'm going to be showing you one example, but there's a lot of different things you can do with it. You can embed different stones into it, different charms. You can stamp it with letters, a whole bunch of different things. You can even sculpt it, which is pretty cool. So here is what it actually looks like, the product. You have part A and you have part B. Now you also have the instructions, which are pretty extensive, which are actually going to tell you all about how to mix it, how to color it, how to embed objects in it, how to sculpt it. So a lot of really good information comes with the product itself. You're also going to get a pair of gloves. Now, from my experience working with this, you're going to need extra gloves. I would definitely recommend buying yourself a box of gloves to have on hand when you work with this. You'll actually see through the course of this video me probably change gloves a number of times. So you get, like I said, a lot of clay. So this is going to fill approximately 40 bezels. So just medium-sized bezels, but 40 medium-sized bezels, which is great. That's awesome. That's a huge amount of clay. So you can also, like I mentioned, you can color it. Now I'm going to be using CASTIN Craft Color Pigment, and this is an opaque, but you can also use a transparent. And I have a little sample here that I've done up. So this is what this clay looks like in its base form, hardened. It is an air dry clay, so it's self-hardening. You do not need to bake it. It will cure on its own. Like I mentioned, you can add coloring to it. So this is a transparent blue, and this is with 1 drop of transparent blue in it. This is with 2 drops of transparent blue. Here is with 1 drop of opaque blue. And then here is actually approximately half a drop. I tried to wipe some away of the opaque blue. So you can really create a lot of different color variations, even with just 1 container of pigment. So for this particular project, we are going to be using a green opaque dye, of course the clay. We're going to use gold mica powder, a Nunn design bezel brooch, a stamp, and this is a well-loved stamp from the design space, and then we'll need a little paintbrush as well. So through the course of this project, I will show you how to mix the clay, add the mica powder, add the dye, and stamp your clay. Let's begin. I know that was a bit of an intro. So I'm going to don some gloves. What's also nice is that this clay comes in these really nice secure tubs. So it's very easy to just take the amount out that you want, put the lid back on, and save the rest of the clay for later. You are going to only want to mix as much as you're going to use because once you start mixing these, the curing process will begin. You cannot save it for later. So the unmixed clay, save for later. The mixed clay has to be used right away. And you do have a couple hours work time with the mixed clay. So we're going to use this bezel. So I'm going to go ahead. It's a little hard to get into initially, but once you actually get in here, it's easy to get into the tub again. Best way I found to do this to get equal parts A and B is to make a little ball. Actually, I can tell that's already going to probably be too much clay. So make a little ball. And then make a matching little ball. And line them up. And they look pretty even. That was lucky. Normally you have to take little pinches off as you go, but that worked out well. So these are good to save for later. And now squish your balls together and start mixing them. And the goal is to get this mixed so it's a nice uniform color with no striations or marbling. And it is going to be sticky. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. And now we're going to add our color. So you always mix parts A and B first, and then you add your color. So I've got this opaque green. And make sure your work surface is covered when you're doing this, or you're working on scrap pieces of paper, or maybe just like us, your work surface has already seen better days and you're not too terribly concerned about it at this point. So we're going to take a drop and put it into the middle of our clay. Now I'm going to fold it over, and this is going to get real messy. If you wanted to, you could wipe some of that away and then add more later. You always want to add more versus subtract, because there's no way of subtracting. So start with a little bit less and then add more to it. So you could just take some and just put it away if you want even less than one drop. And you see that stick. So it is getting quite sticky. And it's very soft, very squishy. Okay. Now I'm going to put that down, and I'm going to change my gloves. You don't have to do that, but I really like working with a fresh pair of gloves because this is super sticky at this point. Peel these guys off, and I'm going to put on a fresh pair. Okay. And you can see that rolls much more easily in my hand. So now I want to fit it into my bezel. So I'm going to mimic the shape of my bezel as best as I can and set it down in there. And I'm not quite sure if I'll need to subtract any of this clay or not. I'll see that in a minute here. I'll just pinch some away maybe if I have too much, but I think this is actually going to be pretty good. So I'm just pressing it into place and working it into the corners and around the edges. Since you can dye this clay yourself, it's really nice that you have the opportunity to create different shades of even the same color. So if you're doing a bigger project, you could, in theory, create an ombre effect, which would be pretty fun. I actually think I like this amount of clay in here. Now you can embed objects. I'm not going to do that for this particular project. I really want to just use the rubber stamp. I will show you in another video how to embed some chatons. Okay, so you're just working it, pressing it into place, making sure it's nice and even. Okay. So now I'm going to add the mica powder. I'm going to do that using a paintbrush. And I'm just going to lightly add the mica powder directly on top of the clay. And then when you're done and this is fully cured, you'll want to go ahead and just take a soft little towel or something and rub it on top of it to get any of the excess powder off that's not stuck onto the clay. And you will let this cure overnight. So now we're going to stamp it. So take your mica powder and you're going to put that on your stamp as well. And you can see we did not properly clean our stamp after use. flip it over. We're going to center it on top of our piece. And I actually do need to kind of get over top of this to see that it's centered. And we're going to press into place, gently rocking it, and pull up. And now we have a really pretty little design on there. And we are done. And now we're just going to let this guy cure. So it's a very pretty, subtle little brooch. And like I said, when we're done, we would go ahead and, well, after it's cured, I mean, we would just wipe this with a little cloth, and a little bit of this excess powder is going to come off so that just a little bit more of the green will show through. So that is how you use EnviroTex jewelry clay with mica powder, a rubber stamp, and also an opaque pigment.